That's essentially what I wanted to explore. So, really, I had these thoughts and ideas, maybe while I was dancing or while I was sitting, and ideas just kind of came to me, and I would jot them down, and I wonder if I can make a narrative out of this. I want the listener to feel like they can trust who they're listening to. So, because of that, I have to be a little vulnerable. I have to be relatable.
This is a podcast called Walk, Talk, Listen. An attempt to connect people and make this world a bit better by sharing opinions and experiences based on the belief that everyone's perspective is true, albeit partial. My name is Maurice and I would like to welcome you to yet another episode of Walk, Talk, Listen.
Okay, good day everybody. This is another episode of the podcast Walk, Talk, Listen. And as always, I'm delighted with today's guest who will introduce herself. Sofia, please go ahead.
Hello, my name is Sofia Sayabalian. I was born in Los Angeles, California, and up until 18, I was in LA. And then for my undergrad, I decided to go to Seattle to study. So I completed my bachelor's degree in communication and media with a minor in psychology. I graduated in 2023, and then I decided to continue my education, and right now I am in 2 weeks about to graduate with my Master of Communication in Digital Media from the University of Washington.
Oh, that's exciting, right? Another
Thank you.
2 weeks. I have a lot of questions about that actually, because it's a topic also what fascinates me, as you know, because we know each other quite well. We are both, linked with the Center of Ecumenical and Interfaith Engagement. But before we go there, so you mentioned you were born in Los Angeles and LA. Tell a bit about that in terms of how was that upbringing. When I think about LA, I think about cars, not about walking.
Yeah.
And I tell this story because one of the first 100-mile walks that I did actually in South California. And when I was walking, I think it was day 2, car stopped and asked me, "Do you need a ride?" And so I said, "No, I'm walking to raise awareness about hunger and poverty and injustice." And then they looked at me, "But why would you walk?" And I said, "No, to show my solidarity." And they were really surprised that I was walking and decided not to get into the car. So
Yes.
that is my perception that I have about LA and when I think about LA. So
LA is a melting pot of diversity and cultures. So I'm Armenian, that's my ethnicity. And so growing up, I'm also quite family oriented. So we spoke Armenian in our house. Till this day, I can still understand and speak pretty okay. And so I think I was exposed to a lot of, different cultures and languages, kind of growing up. And as you may know, LA is very spread out. So when I say I'm from LA, please don't think of like the Hollywood kind of scene and cars necessarily, but we had access to the mountains and the beaches, lots of nature, uh, just I guess a lot of Cali vibes if you think of it that way. And I loved Cali. I was thinking of staying for my college, but as I heard from West Coast schools, it just kind of ended up happening that, okay, let me do my education in Seattle. And my family was very supportive of me going away. I think there was this trust that was instilled from a young age that at one point we grow up and we need to, hold responsibility for our actions and our next steps. And I'm happy that I was supported through through both undergrad and now graduate school for my family.
And do you have any siblings?
Yes, I have a older brother.
Mm-hmm.
Um, he's let's see, so I'm 25.
Mm-hmm.
He's 27, and he actually right now is in Armenia doing some
Oh wow.
volunteer work with the youth, with the schools. And he's just having the time of his life, and this is the first time he's really lived abroad.
Uh-huh.
Um, and so I think seeing him have such a beautiful experience, kind of reconnecting with his culture, and he's been there for almost 6 months, has really inspired me, like to look past LA and America and to see, as I know we'll probably talk about, kind of a global outlook on all sorts of issues that we have to go through and
Yeah.
deal with in our world.
So were your brother and you close? 'Cause you're 2 years apart,
Yes.
but yeah. So did you do a lot of things together, and how was that? And you also mentioned that you still spoke Armenian at home. So did your parents tell a lot of stories about the life? And did you go back as well in when you or you have never been back?
So I've only been there twice in my life.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't been back since I was 8.
Okay.
So, well, fun fact, I was baptized in Armenia. So my parents flew me
Mm.
there and went through that ceremony. And I think culturally, Christianity has been a big part of my life, sort of, again, in that cultural sense. Um, but to your questions about my brother, him and I are close. I think it's been really cool to see our relationship develop as we've gotten older, and now we get to ask each other questions about like advice on love life and sort of things that he could see from a woman's perspective versus me from like his perspective, and that's been fun to see, and I think we inspire each other a lot with what we're doing professionally as well.
So is he in the same direction as you in terms of professionally, or?
I think he he really values education. And that's something that I value too, working at the Center for Ecumenical and Interreligious Engagement at Seattle U. Um, and I think he values sort of um, meaning making and connecting with youth and people around him. But he has, in terms of vocation, he's worked with my dad. And they both work in sort of like a gas station business. So him going out to Armenia has sort of been him really finding himself in that larger avocation versus vocation way of seeing the world. And so I think in some ways, I took a more like traditional
Mhm.
route. So I did undergrad, then graduate school, and now I'm really feel confident. I'm a young professional. I'm doing really interesting things, and I'm happy about them. Um, and so, but then I think his path has been discovering, different milestones in that journey for him along the way.
Mhm. Yeah. And and so you really went at the communication, psychology, that direction. Um, did you figure that out already when you were young? That
Mm.
kind of this is what attracts me, or did it come later?
Um, I think it came a little later. I think it came so when I was younger, for 10 years in my earlier childhood up until middle of high school, I took art lessons. So I loved painting and I loved
Uh,
anything artistic. Um, and I think part of me wanted to go to art school and like become an artist and major in painting and sort of go that route. Um, so I loved creativity from a young age. And then when it was time to choose a major, sort of more of the realities kicked in and pushes from my family to choose something that was, more practical. And I'm not saying that, artists are not practical, but if you know what I mean. Um, so anyway, I chose communication because at that time, um, I was associating it with journalism and writing, um, expression, but it wasn't that way. Um, More of like the journalism communication. And I was always like, well, I can go to college, and if worse comes to worse, I could always switch majors. That was something that I
Uh-huh.
also felt confident about. Um, but during my time in undergrad, I enjoyed communication. I enjoyed courses like intercultural communication and learning about multimedia. And so I was like, oh, I could actually take some of what I learned in painting and sort of design um, into this field in a new way. So I think it evolved sort of in the way that I evolved. Um, and then when I found the communication leadership program at the University of Washington, it seemed a little perfect because the program understands how um, there are aspects of our human nature that are important in how we do address communication. Um, and the large part of the program is learning how to communicate with technology, especially now. So those artistic skills, I've sort of adapted, whether it's into website design or, um, yeah, I guess that's the main example that I have. Um, but then even skills like writing and reading, um, you can argue those have their home in technology too. And um, if we, for instance, AI could be a tool with writing as well. So things just kind of started to make sense. Um, but I think stopping and asking ourselves, like, uh, the meaning behind what we're doing and the intention and the impact that we can make, um, just to kind of ground ourselves again back into that uh, importance of the human nature quality.
Mhm. Are you still painting?
I am still painting on and off.
Hmm.
I don't think I've painted in, actually, I haven't painted in about a year.
No, and I mean, of course, you're also very busy. I mean, you started with another 2 weeks, right? So I guess you have a lot of things that you need to do for school. I'm familiar with quite a couple of things in terms, especially around your creativity. You're responsible for different websites out there. One is for the center that you alluded to, and if the listeners will go to your website, and I will share your website in the podcast notes. They will, yeah, you show that on your website in terms of what you have done, um, and it's extremely creative. I have a question a little bit about the technology, and you were mentioning about AI also. Um, so when people go to your website and read what you try to do and what you stand for, it seems that you're somebody that really values human voice and intimacy.
Mm.
You also made these, how do you call those recording that you did around the
The
dancing?
audio
Audio
stories.
stories, yes.
Mm.
Listeners really
Yeah.
check that out because it's beautiful. But as someone who values human voice and intimacy, how do you approach storytelling in that era that is dominated by these
Mm.
digital platforms and emerging technologies? And that is further, around AI especially, right? So yeah, what is your
Mm.
how do you approach? Has it changed or yeah, walk us through that a bit.
Oh, that's a really good question. Um, so what you mentioned is my graduate project. Really,
Uh-huh.
it's sort of this example of audio storytelling and the skills I've learned um, in that. So And I struggle with even using the word podcast to call it that, but if I can explain it, it's essentially sort of a hybrid between narrative storytelling with my voice and me speaking about my experience. Um, and I've woven interviews into that. So the topic is dancing, dance as a hobby, dance as a form of expression, one that bridges the mind, body, and spirit, one that is an asset to our well-being. There's so much research on the connection between physical health and well-being. So if dance is an expression, an embodiment of that, that's essentially what I wanted to explore. So really, I had these thoughts and ideas maybe while I was dancing or while I was sitting, and ideas just kind of came to me, and I would jot them down, and I wonder if I can make a narrative out of this. I want the listener to feel like they can trust who they're listening to. So because of that, I have to be a little vulnerable. I have to be relatable. So let me talk about my experience, whether that's, kind of like whatever it is. So if you listen to the episodes, you'll get to hear a bit about how I started dancing. Um, and then I'll think of interesting questions to ask fellow dance instructors. And then through that, I kind of carve out the story. Through their excerpts, I carve it out. To be honest, it's still a work in progress. So I'm still trying to find the most sustainable way of doing this because there's only been 2 episodes out so far, and each episode took 10 weeks, which I'm sure as a podcaster, that's an insane amount of time. But of course, creativity takes time and it
Mhm.
takes multiple drafts and revisiting projects.
Yeah. No, and yeah, you told me before that it took a lot of time, but you also, I mean, in a way you feel it, in another way you don't, right?
Mm, thank you.
And I think that's the right balance that you want. I mean, you so it's not something like, okay, she put a mic in front of somebody, and then you're streaming it. No. Yes, yes on the one hand, and no on the other hand. You feel that there are many more layers. But when you look at your website again and also read what you have written and what you tell at these um, narrative. How do you call that again? The word was not a podcast. You
Narrative storytelling.
narrative
Yeah.
storytelling.
Mhm.
Um, I think, if I'm not mistaken, you mentioned that you use curiosity as a guide.
Yes.
Okay. So I have a question around that. Um, so how has curiosity shaped your understanding of communication and the
Mm.
spaces we create for meaning?
Um, so we had a guest speaker in one of my recent classes in my program. And so I don't want to take credit for what he said, but he said, "You can't fake your own curiosity. You got to follow it. Our piercing curiosity, it's very human. What makes you get in the zone? What fascinates you?" And I resonate with that. And I think I've been doing that maybe unintentionally or a little intentionally. You'll get down rabbit holes or you'll really feel in the zone, whether it's finding the perfect uh, ambient background noise to an episode that I'm working on, um, or thinking of having a conversation with a fellow dancer. What can I ask them that is very open ended and they can receive it um, maybe in a way that they weren't expecting, but that they never knew that they really wanted to be asked that question or have the chance to speak. Um, I really, I think I've always been curious about other people, and um, of course, that's how we connect. It's part of our human nature is to be social and um, find that human connection. And so podcasting, for example, is a structured way of actually getting to that, and just like you're doing with me right now, and sort of asking me questions, and we get to have it back and forth. Anyway, I think all of that makes me curious.
When I'm going a step back to your brother, who's now for 6 months in Armenia. Um, so you talk with each other on a regular basis, and you listen to his stories, what is happening with him, because you told me, yeah, you're enthusiastic, and maybe in a way you're also now reconnected with part of your roots because he's there and you share. So is that correct, what I'm saying? And then the second question is, um, now, because of the learning that you go through and the projects that you work on, are you asking different questions to your brother as a result of that?
Um, I think I'm listening better to him. Um, I think that well, just someone in the communication field, you really learn a lot about speaking and then listening, and um how there's a lot of value in just being present with someone. Um and so I think even when we're on the phone, whether we just get to talk once a week, he really feels that presence, and I do too, across time zones, across everything that's going on. So literally being in my program, learning these soft skills, which really are, as we know, in major companies and industries, are ever more important now. Um, Me actually applying that to my life and in my relationships with my family, um, and I could see the impact, and they will also tell me like how uh, thankful that they are to um, feel that they are in good spirits when we exchange a conversation with each other.
Um, so you're 2 weeks. You have 2 weeks to go for your study. You're also working at the moment, um, still for the center, and then you do some freelance work as well. um, so what calls you to keep going in your work and life? And is there a story or a moment that has moved you to go the extra mile? And what I mean is physically, emotionally, or creatively. Sorry.
Um, so I think feeling very supportive from my family. Um, they've in a very grateful place where they've set the stage, they've handed it to me, and they just trust that I will go about that wisely and with the means and resources I have to find myself, to quote make it in a way that I can at my pace. And that's so much trust to give someone, and I realize that. And so I hold it in my hand like very preciously. Um, but in a more abstract way, what drives me in life, I have a lot of gratitude for the impact people have made in my life, and for the realization that I too can make that impact in someone else's. Simple things motivate me, cooking a nutritious and delicious meal motivates me. Um, Dancing, if I can impact others to carve out a little bit of their space and time um, for themselves to reconnect with that core being inside of them. Um, in a more existential way, when we kind of realize that we're only a dot in this huge expansion in the huge universe. Um, things start to feel more real and more, like problems can feel a little lighter. So it's all pretty deep. But at the end of it, I think I try to carry a kind of lightness with my spirit. Um, and I guess that motivates me. And as I said, my family, of course, and just being grateful that I'm in a good spot.
No, and I understand that you're grateful and you're thankful for the space that your family has created for you. Is that also sometimes does that weigh heavy on the shoulders?
Um, yes, I think, um, especially when, we if I accomplish something and it's like, "Oh, that's so great. Okay, now what's next?" Or like, "What else can I do?" I think when there's not enough praise and time to celebrate the goods, like the accomplishments, we just keep going to the next thing and trying to achieve this and that. That's when the burnout can happen, and that's when it's not fun or it's not easy anymore, or you forgot what it was that you were fighting for, or that was your purpose and drive. So taking it step by step and just celebrating those milestones, even if they're small. Um, that's one way to answer. And then the other thing that we've talked about in my program has been imposter phenomenon or imposter syndrome. Um, and so sort of uh realizing that no, like all of this is like because you is that I have worked for it and hard, and I should celebrate those achievements, like I said, and not let self doubt kind of uh override the positives. Um, yeah, and it's easier said than done. I think definitely in a hyper productive society, um and I'm not one to um like I'm one that has given to that, even when there are moments of difficulty or um, sadness or depression that can happen. It's kind of like, well, let's just put ourselves into work because that's what feels good, or like at least then I'll get a return on my investment if I'm working so hard. Um, but it's not very healthy in the long run. Um, and I've done that before too. So.
Dance is helping you, right? In also in terms of coping and
Yeah.
go to a place where you feel
Yeah.
free or you
Mhm.
as a bridge between body, mind, and spirit. And
Absolutely.
yeah, I have a question around that. So, in what ways has movement helped you access deeper truths or healing?
Um, well, there is research that shows that
Uh-huh.
the body, stores pain, stores trauma, stores all sorts of tension. And so when I started moving and sort of dancing, I could sense that. I could sense, oh, this move feels tense, or oh, I can't do that, or even something as simple as stretching and those kinds of things. There's a whole field in dance therapy that kind of goes through this and explores it. But for me, I think it was just signing up for a class, let's do it, meeting an instructor, seeing how they taught, um, and it was all pretty motivating. It was motivating to be in a space where I was being taught, um, being around other learners. Um, you know, dance is something that is creatively st- is creatively stimulating for the brain. So you're trying to remember the choreography. And so going back to creativity and art, it in itself is a very artistic form of expression. So just another wing that was sort of developed from my early days of painting, I think I found through dance.
And again, I think you did such a great job there. The Power of Dance project, is that
Yeah,
how the name?
power of
Yeah.
dance.
Um, Piggybacking what you just said, can you share one insight or moment of that project that particularly stayed with you?
So in the first episode, I had interviewed I had interviewed Kara, who I met at one of the first dance classes I ever took, and it was actually at the University of Washington. They had some dance classes at their school gym, so she was an instructor for contemporary sort of dance. Um, or no, it was a hip hop dance, but anyway. Um, so I interviewed her and asked about her story and her experience, and she said that um, she had done some work overseas, working in Bolivia, um, working in the brothels, and so she would meet the dancers at one point, and she would just dance with them in a way that they dance just for themselves, just to feel good, feel creative expression, connect with their bodies in a way that they hadn't before. And then after that, they could then move forward with what they were doing and in their lives. Um, and then later, could they decide if they wanted to speak with Kara because Kara was working with the anti-trafficking organization in Bolivia. Um, but it was all, up to them. But just the dancing part, that was the gift that she was able to, uh, I guess, provide for them and give them that space. So, kind of when I heard that story, I was inspired. And I was like, yeah, there's a power. There's a power of dance for sure.
Oh, well, yeah, thanks. Thanks for sharing that. Um, well, when I think about dance, I think about music. And music is very important to me. Therefore, I always have a question about music as well. Um, so if I ask you to come up with a piece of music or a song that best reflects what you are about, which song for the big part, you know, which song or piece of music would that be and why?
So the song that I would choose is by Kina Grannis, and it's called In Your Arms. Um, and so this song, I actually first heard it in seventh grade. So I've known this song for a long time. Um, it's just a very happy melody, kind of a feel good song. Um, some of the lines go, anything we have known, anything we've forgotten, in the rain, in the dark, we'll lay. In your arms, I'll stay. Um, and so, who are the arms? Are they from a person? Are they yourself? Are they your own arms? Is it just the world? Is it nature? Um, so, the melody of the song is quite nice and it has an aesthetically um, kind of nice quality, in my opinion. But then I also chose this song because the music video is really fascinating. It's using stop motion animation of over 200,000 jelly beans in the background. So as she's moving through these different scenes, each jelly bean has slightly been moved in the video. So it's very colorful and fun, um, while having this like professional quality and colorful and technical appeal to it. So being a seventh grade kind of wannabe professional painter, I saw this and I was like, wow, this is incredible and um, very creative.
Oh, and Kina is also from California, actually, right? So
Oh, yeah,
yeah,
cool.
um, interesting that you picked up on those different aspects, also the video. So
Yeah.
that seems to be in line with what you're trying to do as well, right? So thanks for sharing that. I would like to go back to something that you mentioned in the beginning in terms of, you were flown to Armenia to get baptized. So Christianity has played a role in your life. Is that still the case? And is that also the reason then that you got involved with the center? And I don't know if I mentioned the center's name wrong in the beginning. So it is the Center of Ecumenical and Interfaith Engagement. So,
When
yeah. So how did you get involved? And was that one of the reasons, or was it no? They're looking for somebody that can help with communication. And how did that come about?
um, it was the latter. So it was that they were looking for someone sort of in a communication web capacity role. Um, but I was going to Seattle U, so I knew that I was attending a Jesuit Catholic university that had these interesting institutes and centers on their campus. So I was already sort of interested in some of this work. I think I was just, again, curious. Um, so when I learned that they were a interfaith, interreligious um, center, um, I was like, huh, okay, well, um, I will be learning as I go, a large part of my role then was kind of researching into what this meant, in terms of how can we communicate this in a way that's digestible, not just for a website, but when we talk about our presence on a campus, on a very diverse campus. Um, and I was up for the challenge. I was up for going into something that was not really my wheelhouse in terms of religion and interreligion. I didn't really know what that meant. Um, and then kind of going into your other question about me being Armenian and being, um, you know, um, baptized in Armenia, I think for my family, for my mom and dad specifically, um, it was something that was important to them. Um, but it was important to them, but I grew up and my mom and dad, so sort of immediate family, my mom, dad, my brother, and I, we never really practiced the religion. So we never really practiced Christianity um, in a more formal way, but it was evident in our culture, kind of in our more outer circle. Um, in the holidays we would celebrate, in kind of the way we spoke about who we are and our heritage and um, a very old, ancient heritage rooted in ancient Christianity. But it was kind of this interesting dichotomy because I was literally flown to Armenia to be baptized, but I also just felt like um, I guess detached a bit from understanding further about it. And so when it came to speaking about religion and spirituality, sure, it was encouraged. We could talk about it sort of in my immediate family, um, and it was never really, yeah. So it was free to explore, um, And so I think when I began undergrad, so when I was going to college, then I was like, oh, well, now I'm actually away from home. Maybe this is a good time to explore this part of myself that I didn't really know what to feel about. I mean, I was proud that I was baptized in Armenia, but unfortunately, I couldn't really speak further about it because I didn't really know why, or I didn't really have a connection with it. I thought it was cool, but that was kind of the extent of it. So anyway, I think it was nice to use those, from 18 to 22 to kind of um, explore spirituality more. Um, yeah.
And is that also something that you see among your peers, your generation? And I'm talking specifically, people you meet through your work then at Seattle University and through your study now at Washington. So what I'm saying or what I'm asking is actually similar to because what I'm kind of understanding from you is, okay, you're not uh, religious, but spiritual maybe, as a part of your upbringing and the fact that you were baptized. So is that also something that you see among your peers, or you can't maybe generalize? What do you see? What's happening?
Yes. I think it's it's not really something that my peers talk about or that I usually will bring up. Um, and sometimes when it is talked about, it's unfortunately sometimes just bad experiences, and so there's already like a negative view um, on I would say more organized religions. And this is again, I'm just speaking from my experience, some of the friends I've had and peers. But then I also think there's a there's a group of people who um, who just don't know, and maybe they're uncomfortable talking about what spirituality means to them because maybe they're actively working through that. And then maybe they're trying to gauge the other person. So, as communicators, we're trying to only disclose however much the person we're talking to is self disclosing. So that makes it hard to be authentic and have these authentic conversations with people. Um, it's personal, people don't need to share, and that's okay too. Um, and then there's many people from all over the world and from different countries that I met who don't really practice a religion, or they say that their country doesn't really have a religion. So that's been interesting to hear. Um, and so I think it's definitely a mixed blend. Um, but from my experience, the peers I've had who have had positive experiences practicing and like in whatever level that is for them, um, I think again, talking with someone, with a trusted person when they feel comfortable enough, um, is a good feeling because you can sense that they feel comfortable, and you can sense that, oh yes, I like my good peer saw me the other day and she texted me, oh, I saw you on the bus today and I was going to church. And so she can say those things. And she knows, oh, that's great. Glad you saw me, and thanks for sharing that about your life. And so it's definitely a spectrum.
Okay. And because you work for the center, um, don't you get questions about what are you doing then? And or yeah, I can
Yes,
imagine that people are curious about what you're doing.
time to time I
Mm-hmm.
do. Um, and so I'll answer, whatever, like if they have specific questions.
Mhm.
Um, but if the question is more about where would I label myself in a center like this,
Hmm.
in a religious and ecumenical um, within a Jesuit Catholic university. Um, I will say that, well, like it's in our name that we are interreligious, we are interfaith, but we are rooted in sort of an Ignatian philosophy, which um, addresses like the whole person and really values education. So being at a university, um, I think is a good foundation for it. And then yeah, I'm happy to share my personal like development in spirituality. When I was a student at Seattle U, so we had to take two mandatory courses, sort of in the spirituality realm, and they could be anything. So one of the ones I took was Introduction to Mindfulness, and that was rooted in Buddhism sort of thought. And so we learned about that religion um, and philosophy. And then the other course I took was was on Catholics in the U.S. So it was definitely quite different. But again, just being open to learning about different faiths and their trajectories. And so I really resonated with the first one with the intro to mindfulness. And so even till this day, I still practice a lot. I still practice a lot of those mindfulness techniques, including meditation, and I found them to help my life.
Sophia, what I hope that this podcast is contributing to is, connecting people, showing people, um, different perspectives that are out there. And one of the ways I'm trying to do that is connect you with the previous guest, who is actually a musician. Um, and the question that she has um, for you is,
My question for the next guest is like, how do you feel about AI?
Yes, I love this question because it is prevalent in my work and in my school. Um, as I mentioned, a large part of my program is learning how to communicate with these emerging technologies like AI. Um, and so so for example, I took a course called Human-Centered AI Augmented Internal Communications. Um, and one of the things that was just constantly um, emphasized was this reality that AI won't replace you, but it might replace someone who does know these tools and who is familiar. And so that goes into this thing that we talk a lot about, which is AI literacy. So the skills that are associated with the ability to comprehend these principles, concepts, as well as limitations, implications, and of course, ethical considerations um, involving AI. So I'm still in that learning part. Well, I am graduating soon, but um, I think if you ask this with a lot of people, they'll probably feel that they're still learning along the way. But I think having those different mindsets, like having an open and learning mindset, can be helpful. Um, I think it's a fascinating tool. I think in internal communications work, so kind of a large part of my role at CEIE um, is internal communication. So um, I have used it in some ways in terms of seeing things from a more less abstract way, and if I could just get something more structured. Um, versus I've used it, let's say, for design advice. So if I give it a few like hex codes of these colors, and I ask it, okay, can you give me something complementary and then some background tones? It's just interesting what it will come up with because artist to artist, we have our own of course, thoughts on these things, and they all come in different points. Um, so having the I think having the discipline, like knowing when to use it and kind of when to brainstorm for yourself and work for yourself, to work on something for yourself first before getting involved with it, um, is a is important to me as well.
No, thanks for lifting that up, and it would be fascinating to see in how AI would intersect with creative work, right? Further, you gave us some idea of where that could go, or where you have tried to explore that further. We should do a separate podcast around that. Um, yeah, your question for the next guest.
What is your favorite book and why?
Okay, cool. Um, Sophia, you know what I always try to do is also lift up the Sustainable Development Goals, because for me
Yes.
that's kind of a framework that, as a world, we have agreed that we need to make this world more sustainable. 17 goals were identified, and then we are not on track.
Yep.
We are behind. And then the inner development goals were developed by another group of people, and looking at being, thinking, relating, collaborating, and acting as the 5 inner development goals that we need to set, and develop skills like critical thinking and empathy. Again, that could be another whole podcast talking about, those 2 things. But the specific question that I have for you, is there any of these goals that resonate with your work or values?
I think so. They all have a place, but
Mhm.
the first one being so relationship to self resonated with me because when I think of sort of the facets of that, so what does that mean? Let's say let's look at our inner compass. Let's look at our values. Um, being self-aware as well. That wait, we actually do need the inner development goals to reach the sustainable development goals, and that's why the whole inner development goals were created, right? So uh, I think that number one, relationship to self, because if your cup's not full, then how can you fill someone else's cup? And we all need to go around and just keep helping others and filling each other's cups, but it's um, but it's hard to do that when you don't try to look within too.
Maybe piggybacking on those cups half full, or full. What are you most hopeful about these days?
I think as a communicator, as I mentioned, I really enjoy having conversations with people and just listening, actively listening, hearing their stories and their lived experiences. Um, I am hopeful for these emerging forms of multimedia. Um, I I think that they will um, bring us together more in a creative way. Um, something that could feel a bit um, unhopeful. Is how, let's say, devices and technology have made simple hanging out or just simple human communication harder, and that is totally valid as well. Um, And so I think if I have a space or if people in the humanities or in these interesting fields that naturally weave in human nature and meaning and intimacy and emotional connection into them, and these things exist in many fields, in science and probably even math, in just really fascinating ways. So I'm just hopeful for all of that, I would say. I think have a pretty optimistic view
Mm.
on where we can head.
I like that. I'm still going to ask you, is there one thing that keeps you up at night?
Well, it's hard looking at some of the world news,
Hmm.
and seeing the wars around the world. Um, that keeps me up at night. And so, when I come to these moments where I actively am not looking at the news or I'm actively staying away from it, it's like, well, is that better? Is that worse? So kind of battling with my own inner compass then sometimes. Um, what is the right amount of exposure and capacity um to absorb what is happening, and um then when you get in these moments of, well, I don't know what one person can do to change anything, or then that's unhealthy, and then you go down this pessimistic kind of zone. And so um I think just this sort of existential ache probably is a good way to put it.
Sophia, these conversations always go fast. So
Yeah.
before I thank you, is there anything that you wish I had asked you today and I didn't?
Mm, No, I feel really happy with what you asked me, and I think you covered a great scope of topics, and thank you for having me on your Walk Talk Listen podcast.
Yeah. No, I thank you for everything, everything you did today and what you do and who you are. And as I mentioned it before, but I really think it's great work that you're doing. And, there is a lot of creativity and mastery. So I invite people to check out your website. And I can't wait until, you're finished your study and you will
Thank you so much.
continue to make great things. So, yeah, thanks for that.
Thank you, Maurice.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Walk, Talk, Listen. Please check us out on 100mile.org or follow us on Facebook or Instagram.